I'm going to ask you one question. Just one. And before you answer, I want you to pay attention to the very first thing that comes to mind. Not the answer you'd say out loud, the one you thought before you censored yourself, because that first reaction reveals something about you that no personality test can access. Only this specific thought experiment gets there. If you had 24 hours of complete invisibility, nobody sees you, nobody knows you were there. Zero consequences. What would you do? Most people have a safe answer ready. I'd sneak into a concert. I'd spy on government meetings. Clean answers. But that's not what came first, was it? The first one was different, more specific, more personal. And it probably made you slightly uncomfortable when it appeared. That's the one we're working with now. Option A, your first thought was a specific person. Someone you want to observe without being seen. An ex, a rival, someone who did something to you or who simply intrigues you. You wanted to know what that person does when they think they're alone, what they say, who they really are when nobody is performing for anybody. Option B, your first thought was advantage, money, information, access, getting into a closed place, hearing a conversation that would shift your position, taking something that would normally be out of reach. Not necessarily out of malice, out of pure opportunity. Option C, your first thought was doing something you suppress. Not necessarily something wrong, but something you don't do because there's always an external gaze evaluating you. Invisibility would be a license to be who you are when nobody is watching. Option D, your first thought was to interfere with something. Disrupt a situation that irritates you, expose a lie, give someone a response they'll never know came from you. Invisibility is a way to act in the world without having to be accountable for what you did. Hold on to your answer. Now here's what it reveals. Read the corresponding section honestly, not the one that sounds best. The one that describes what you actually felt when you imagined those 24 hours. If you chose A, your dominant trait is the need for informational control. It's not stalking, it's not obsession in the clinical sense. It's something more subtle and far more common, the dread of being deceived without knowing it. Researchers in social psychology call this relational vigilance, a constant state of alertness about what others really think of you when you're not in the room. People with this trait, highly elevated, invest disproportionate energy in reading signals, a silence in a group chat, a compliment that felt forced, a shift in tone nobody else noticed. The problem isn't that you pick up on these things, it's that you can't rest until you've resolved them. And invisibility would finally be a way to end the uncertainty once and for all. What this reveals isn't paranoia. It's a social survival system that was calibrated for an environment where trusting once cost something real. It makes sense that it exists. The problem is that alert systems don't know how to turn themselves off. They keep running even when the original threat is gone, keeping you in surveillance mode even when there's nothing real to watch for. If you chose B, your dominant trait is conditional ethics. This is going to sound harsher than it is, and so hear it out. Conditional ethics doesn't mean you're dishonest. It means your moral compass responds to context more flexibly than you publicly admit. When consequences exist, you act one way. When they disappear, another version of you takes space. Psychologist Dan Ariely, in his research on dishonesty, discovered something that goes against popular intuition. People aren't honest because they have unshakable character. They're honest because the cost of getting caught is high enough to inhibit the behavior. Remove the cost and the behavior changes in almost everyone, not just bad people. What option B reveals is that you're aware of this about yourself. You know your ethics has a variable that most people pretend not to have. And that honesty about your own potential dishonesty is, paradoxically, a sign of more sophisticated self-knowledge than denial. Most people who choose B aren't less ethical than those who choose C. They're just more honest about the limits of their own ethics. If you chose C, your dominant trait is chronic suppression. This is the result that surprises people most when they recognize themselves in it. Because it doesn't seem dark, it just looks like shyness, or caution, or respect for social norms. But psychologist Susan Harter, in decades of research on authenticity, documented the accumulated cost of living permanently in response to external judgment. Constant background anxiety, the feeling that nobody truly knows you, and a growing distance between who you are and who you show. Invisibility for this profile wouldn't be used to harm anyone. It would be used to finally exist without an audience. What this answer reveals isn't a dark trait in the conventional sense. It reveals that you're carrying a weight that shouldn't be yours. The responsibility of managing every person's perception of you all the time. The real question isn't what you do invisible. It's why you need to be invisible to do it. And the answer almost always leads to the same place. Someone at some point made authentic existence feel dangerous. Invisibility would finally be the safety that was never given any other way. If you chose D, your dominant trait is the interference impulse. This is the most misunderstood profile of the four. It's not violence. It's not cruelty. It's a specific relationship with powerlessness. The feeling of watching wrong situations persist while you observe without being able to act without consequences. Researcher Roy Baumeister, in his studies on everyday evil, identified that most destructive behavior doesn't come from people who want to cause harm. It comes from people who want to restore something: justice, balance, an account that was never settled. Invisibility for this profile wouldn't be a power of destruction. It would be a power of correction in a world where normal corrections are blocked. What this reveals is a sharpened sensitivity to injustice combined with few legitimate channels to process it. The invisible interference is the fantasy of having power in a context where you normally don't. It's not the fantasy of someone destructive. It's the fantasy of someone who cares about how things should be and doesn't have enough tools to get there. Understanding this about yourself changes how you handle frustration in everyday life. What all four traits have in common is that none of them surface when everything is fine. They're responses that emerge when the social cost is removed. And that's exactly why the invisibility thought experiment is so precise. Supervised and unsupervised human behavior are two completely different data sets. Behavioral science uses that difference all the time to understand what people actually value versus what they say they value. Invisibility puts you in the second set, and the second set rarely lies. Not because people are worse than they appear, but because the first set is always being edited. The second one is the raw cut. Leave a comment with your option, A, B, C, or D, and if you have the courage, write what you actually thought before choosing. The very first thing, before you censored yourself. I'll read every response. The shadow is part of everyone. The difference is who has the honesty to look at it. In the next video, what happens with each of these profiles inside a close relationship when they think nobody is paying attention. What each one does differently. And how to identify it before it costs you something you won't want to lose.